All that change that you saw in terms of intensity, we're going to double that this year. Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum, and the media overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne. And I do welcome you this morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. Cyclone and hurricane warnings for Spain. Expect any types of vegetables, especially Almeria, the area where has been the third year losses in a row, to get ripped apart. This is a serious wind event. 120 mile per hour winds going to be sweeping over the coast and across Spain. The wind warnings and dust storm warnings coming up from Africa, blanketing Greece with pink dust through the snowfalls. And the mainstream media keeps continuing to say that, it was a polar vortex broke off because of global warming heat that pushed into the Arctic. That doesn't quite make sense, because if it were to be exactly as such, it would only push the cold air in one direction with these pincers, if you will, like we've seen over the last couple of years. If there is a true intrusion of, they should just call it a high pressure system, but they need to keep harping on, it's warm air in the Arctic, warm air in the Arctic, warm air in the Arctic. It's a high pressure system that's pushing up because our jet streams are in the wrong place. They're going to continue to migrate into the more wrong places, shall we say. They're going to continue to go out of their flows as this new Eddy Grand Solar Minimum intensifies. So what you've just experienced, if you're in the United States and Canada and parts of Europe, where Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the exact same thing, below 0 Fahrenheit temperatures, but the media just didn't cover that. Now, a quick update down in Australia with the heat that's going on. Apparently, they've broken some more heat records, but most interestingly, those heat records being broken on the hot side are like 1 degree Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius warmer than previous records that only go back to the 1910s, 1920s. But the records that are being broken across the United States are something like 50 degrees Fahrenheit below the normal. And these older records that are being broken by 7, 8, 12, 15 degrees Fahrenheit by the thousands. And this episode's brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds since 1974. Full range of garden seeds, microgreen seeds, sprouting seeds, wheatgrass, grain seeds, flower seeds, herb seeds, and ground cover crop. I encourage you to take a look at their website, TrueLeafMarket.com, and they even have free starter guides there for you to learn how to grow sprouts, microgreens, herbs, and wheatgrass. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds. I was doing a rundown already this morning. I'm going to give you some advanced information here that I'm working on a video. 10,000 cold records were broken or more. This is the problem. The temperature stations were pegged literally at the coldest they could go, between 33 degrees Fahrenheit below zero up to 40 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. Other areas were colder than that, but they didn't get the true measurements. So what they're asking is citizens who had thermometers in local locations that didn't have weather stations to send in their warnings to the National Weather Service or their readings. But the warmth in Australia that the mainstream media loves to talk about to prove global warming is happening, because it's 1 degree Celsius over the old record. For the newest temperature measurements coming out from Dr. Roy Spencer. And what I like with the University of Alabama Huntsville data set is they break it down by region, so you can truly see the state of cooling across the planet. Now, Australia will be up for sure because it's been warm, but I've been looking at the temperature models off of Tropical Tidbits, and I'm always seeing cold intrusions pushing through right behind the heat. Although I'm getting an enormous amount of messages coming on saying, hundreds literally, from Australia saying, wow, it was really cold, below the normal, but we just had the heat, but now it's cold. We're getting these diametric opposite swings. The swing that's coming into the United States also, you have to realize it was minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit in some places, but by next week, it's going to be 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost 100 degree Fahrenheit swing in a matter of a week. How do you think the plants are going to behave, the plant life? How do you think the people's immune systems, in terms of human, what do we think that the immune system will do due to these intense temperature swings? Our infrastructure is going to sweat when it does this. From that extreme cold to that extreme heat, and when I say 50 degrees Fahrenheit, if it's minus 50 and you're going up to 50, or if it was minus 40 and you're going up to 50, that's an extreme swing. So everything that was completely frozen solid, including the people that they found that were logwood frozen solid, literally turned to ice. Homeless, students, those trapped in their cars that turned to ice in this event. Literally, their blood froze to a solid. And their bones. The bone marrow froze to a solid. This is not widely being reported on the news. I don't think they want to spook people. They're finding people in their homes that froze to death and turned solid, inside their houses. This is the scariest part. The Arctic sea ice has increased yet again, and they're trying to blame it on global warming somehow, that the sea ice thickness and the breadth of it is somehow blamed on warming temperatures, but I still can't get that logic, you know. They're saying that the heat is causing more ice, more thick ice, and wider coverage of ice compared to the last 15-year average from 2000 to 2015. I just don't get it. Don't understand how that works in the mechanics of thermodynamics. Maybe I'm just a science purist, but thermodynamics does not fit the model where heat causes ice. For me, that's just like over the head. So much is going on with the indication that this grand solar minimum is now intensifying in the winter months and the summer. Both hemispheres are being affected by this. Now, the record floods also are another indicator up in northern Australia, Cairns. They've had the most rain that they've ever recorded in this area. Now, you're used to the outback. You know, people talk about the outback. Really dry. It's an inland desert. Rarely anything grows. They got camels there. A lot of the original inhabitants had moved more toward the coasts because it just dried out too much where they originally lived. And this is the whole thing. The original inhabitants, settlements, etc. were much further inland into what's now deserts. We're talking way north of Cairns and then off to the west. They've had so much rain up there. This is north of Cairns. Daintree River reaching an all-time record height of 41 feet. And parts of northern Queensland, north of Cairns, west of Cairns, recording daily rainfalls of almost 11 inches, 10.91 inches. The most rain the city had ever had. And then some places were more than a decade, some were all-time records, depends on where you're looking at the stations reporting around these areas. Jet streams are moving into different places. This is an indicator that the magnetosphere is weakening further. Remember the forecast from Valentina Zarkova. I've done this many times on my videos where I put a bunch of dots and lines in there to indicate the years. So I just broke that chart down by a single year increments, if you will. So you can see the amount of change that was going to be coming as the magnetosphere and the magnetic waves on the sun actually start to cancel each other out, as we really are now into what I consider the grand solar minimum. All of the change that you saw in the last 5 years, we can indicate as like one unit. So think of everything you saw in the media and read in newspapers, articles, my videos, Christian, Ice Age Farmer, anybody else out there, Christopher, Ice Age 2050 climate guy, Diamond Oppenheimer Ranch, Suspicious Observers, and everybody in between from John Casey and everybody, astrophysicist Piers Corbin, etc. The list is very long. All that information that was compiled in the last 5 years that you've seen as a unit of change, literally everything that is, not this last storm, but everything from 2018 back to 2014, all that change that you saw in terms of intensity, we're going to double that this year. The amount of change coming through 2019, according to the forecast using magnetic fields on the sun, canceling, We're going to see a doubling of all the ferocity of weather that we have seen over the last 5 years. And then it's going to double again in 2020 to 21. So what we're seeing is indications here of these jet streams finally moving into the areas where it's discernible that they're in the wrong place, bringing moisture to the wrong places, cold to the wrong places, heat to the wrong places, is in full swing and full play. The media is trying to downplay this or make you forget it. Almost every article that I'm looking at is today, since this winter record-breaking all-time freeze event is over, 10 degrees over Fahrenheit, it's warmer than normal, and that's pervading the headlines now. They're trying to have you forget how quickly to forget this event because it doesn't fit the global warming narrative, and it never will. It fits the Grand Solar Minimum amplification. They're in damage control at the Uber to smother the internet with articles now to make you forget what just happened. And for me, these last couple of days, I've been really thinking on how the mainstream media is going to try to cover this up and just to have you forget it or explain it away or move on to the next thing so quickly that it'll just be a little blip in history. Instead of facing the facts that this is the coldest it's ever been in all these places up in the Northeast in 9 different states, Midwest plain states, instead of coming to grips with that and talking about it and say, well, maybe it isn't global warming. Maybe it's not CO2. Maybe it's another thing. Maybe it's a combination. I would be happy with that if they put the conversation out and said maybe it's a combination, because it's a start at least to get the conversation looking for solutions, because this is going to intensify every year. This is the beginning of it. What you just saw was in earnest a Grand Solar Minimum climate event with this cooling. Now you can expect one of these yearly from now on, and they're going to just get wider and bigger and dip more south. And understanding that these seismic and volcanic events are cyclical, and you'll want to check out Upheaval, Why Catastrophic Earthquakes Will Soon Strike the United States. Leading experts in the geophysical effects of climate change make a strong case for a link between the sun's cycles of behavior with highly destructive earthquakes. The authors explain that when the sun goes into reduced energy phase, a grand solar minimum as we're entering right now, it produces colder weather and the worst earthquakes across the historical timelines. Included are easy-to-understand charts and graphs showing that we face an imminent threat. Find out the status of the threat for California, Alaska, South Carolina, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and many other states and regions across our planet. And if you want to support this broadcast, click the link in the description box below to Upheaval, Why Catastrophic Earthquakes Will Soon Strike the United States, available in both paperback and Kindle versions. And the thing that's expected too is that the growing seasons are going to be incredibly delayed because of this. Last year, the planting season was delayed a month, 6 weeks. This year, it's probably going to be delayed more. But just don't know the ramifications of what has happened to plants that were planted, like the winter wheat that's out there. Now, generally, winter wheat, it'll hibernate once it's planted in the fall. It'll endure the cold temperatures, and then it'll spring out when it comes up and gets a little bit warmer. That's why they call it winter wheat. It's planted in the fall, it goes hibernates through the winter, and then it springs up and actually starts growing when the temperatures warm up in the spring. Now, spring wheat's something a little different. It's planted in spring, it matures. So, with that being said, these temperatures are going to damage what was in the ground. I don't know how much those seeds can really withstand these types of cold temperatures. Although, caveat with that said, caveat, the Svalbard seed bank uses incredibly cold temperatures to store all the seeds, so they have a longer shelf life, if you will. A lot of times the colder the seeds are before anything has happened with them in terms of maturation, you can keep them for much longer. So if you want to store seeds, put them in your freezer. Svalbard is below 0 Fahrenheit to store the seeds, or right at 0 Fahrenheit. They have 600,000 types of seeds up there that are food-based, and then I guess there's another million of different plants, species, flowers, etc. But they're all at incredibly cold temperatures. The problem with the winter wheat is it's put in the ground in the fall, and it starts to mature and crack a little bit open, and then it hibernates, and then it comes back out. The amount of damage, cold damage to this storm was incredible. I didn't know things could freeze like they froze, literally. I mean, just the amount of broken pipes, etc., is going to take months, weeks, whatever, to clean up and get repaired. The utility crews are going to be working overtime everywhere. I didn't know that asphalt could actually split and peel back. Electric cars? How many of those did you see dead on the road? No electric cars were running during this event. Now, down in Australia, they're not working that well either because it's too hot. So either direction that you're looking in, the heat or the cold, EVs are not really a solution for anything other than optimal weather. And as we do move through, some more of these storm warnings coming out. I've never, ever seen in a place where there's been 9 states at the same time that have a travel ban. Not in a travel ban like you can't fly on the air. Well, there were 5,000 and some flights canceled during this event. But when I say travel ban, I mean literally governments forbid any cars from being on the road. Because if you slid off, you died. You froze to death in your car. Nobody was coming to get you. So the stories are that the tow truck drivers and the tow truck union wouldn't let their crews go out to pull these kind of single rescues because the tow truck drivers themselves would get frostbite before they're able to complete the hookup of the car. So it's sort of like you're on your own in these events because even the rescue teams aren't coming out to get you. This was such an unprecedented event, and I can't believe that the mainstream media is just trying to smooth it over and call it frigid air. Because everywhere I'm looking again, all I'm seeing is frigid air, with just a little bit of frigid, cold air. So, 50 degrees Fahrenheit below normal, that's not frigid air. They should probably just call it limited heat, because it was limited heat, right? So I really want you to, in earnest, whether you are in 100% agreement with what I talk about with this Grand Solar Minimum, or if you're not, this is the best thing. I don't want you to just to believe what I say here. What I want you to do is take a look through the mainstream media headlines over the next few days especially and see how they switch from the cold to the heat and just focus on the heat and just totally forget this event. And then how they try to minimize it moving forward. Like they can't minimize it right now because the social media feeds are completely stuffed and full of record-breaking temperatures from the National Weather Service, people's thermometer readings, just people on the street reporting what they saw, like hundreds of thousands of photos and reports about this incredible event that came across. Smoking water, got sea fog all over the place, rivers, lakes. It'd be really difficult for them to do it now because there's such an inundation on the social media, including videos, audio, snippets of Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Minds, whatever. They can't really get into that flow of info at the moment to cut it off because it's too overwhelmingly convincing that this event is something historic. But give it a week or two after all that stuff floods through the social media, and they'll be back on it again, trying to convince you that it was just, it was colder in the 80s. Oh, we had a colder event in the 1950s. This really was an all-time record cold. It was colder than in the 80s overall. And I've noticed a little switch here in the last days or so. Instead of saying, all right, this is the coldest ever recorded in so many locations ever, that they're trying to say now the entire decade of the 80s was actually colder. Even though we had this rare event, still the 80s was much colder than this particular decade we're in. So they're already trying to shift the narrative to the whole decade now versus a record-breaking event that pinpoints to a full-on climatic change in play. They want you to continue with the global warming narrative because they want to continue with the CO2 taxes and the global government push. It's never going to go away. I don't care how much information comes out about Grand Solar Minimum or the intensifying effects. If it was like this even down in Florida and Cuba, they would still blame it on global warming. If Cuba had minus 50 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it would be blamed on global warming. No doubt. Every event moving forward is going to continue to be blamed on CO2. And I personally do not feel that's a correct assumption or finding. We've kind of entered down the rabbit hole here of what people are seeing in front of their eyes and truly what's in front of them versus what the mainstream media is trying to still fill as the warmest year ever, all this stuff happening. At some point, there's going to be a realization that what the mainstream media is telling you is inaccurate. And I do believe that's the cusp at the end of 2019 and well into 2020. By the end of 2020, I think there'll be the fence sitters will have come over to the sun change side. A lot more people will understand the sun's driving our climate. And there'll be far less support for global warming. And there'll be a lot more people talking about the solutions, because what just happened, it's going to take a long time to clean that up. Now, there's going to be extreme above normal heat event coming through the next few days in the United States and Canada. It's going to be warm for approximately 7 days. And then there's another one of these Arctic vortex on the way. They're just unsure how far it's going to dip down this time. Is it going to dip as far? And what I found is a travesty amongst all things happening, regardless of your beliefs of the Grand Solar Minimum, CO2, whatever. The travesty was the National Weather Service and the news stations and all the mainstream media had this information for days before the event. I put out videos 4 days in advance of this because all the information was out there. All the weathercasters that had real morals were putting out saying this is the life-changing event. This is the coldest ever temperatures you're going to experience in your lifetime, at least for this year up to now. Ground temperatures at minus 40 Fahrenheit, no wind chill. That's straight up temperature measurements. They were out on the net saying, hey, we need to get ready for this, and you guys need to protect yourselves and go get supplies and do all this and get ready, because this is a historic thing coming. A historic superfreeze is on the way. Ryan Maue, Joe Bastardi, and a whole crew across the net was putting out this info well in advance of any mainstream media. And they didn't even talk about it till 1 day before. And when it started, like hours before, they gave you the warning, which is criminal, in fact. How many people could have protected themselves in a better fashion had they had more warning? How many utility crews could have gotten ready in advance? How many tow truck crews? How many governments could have planned better for this? But no, the global warming agenda they didn't want people to get 3 days of thought of, wow, historic cold's coming. That doesn't fit global warming narrative. See, your life means nothing to them. The global tax does. They would let you freeze to death in order to pass their global tax. And that's what they did. They let people freeze to death. Literally, they turned to logwood and their blood froze to a solid because they didn't give people these warnings. But hey, keep pushing the global tax. It's all good. More money can save it. You know, if you would have paid more money on your global taxes, they could have stopped this event right here. That's the insanity that they're telling you. If you pay a global tax to limit carbon dioxide, they could have stopped this event. 4 days in advance, a guy like me out here, just a normal guy who knows where to go and take a look at the weather temperatures and look at the forecast models. I don't have a PhD. I'm a normal guy who knows how to search for information. And I found all this days in advance, and the Weather Channel and all, it downplayed it so much. Oh, it's going to be cold. It's going to be cold. Oh, get ready. Oh, it's historic cold. It's criminal how the mainstream media colluded to wait until the very last second to warn you that this cold was here. And then they only are covering it during the actual event. And already since it's tapering off the temperatures, they're already using words like heat wave, warm up, just to make you forget it. Well, anything's going to warm up after minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, under zero. This is where we're at right now. Like, your life means nothing for this agenda to steam ahead. They'll sacrifice billions to get this put in play. And you're deluding yourself if you think they won't. If you think you matter to their agenda, you do not. You are a pawn, a slave, and your life is worth nothing to push this global tax through. It's time for us to all wake up and understand what's truly happening here. We only had 12 hours before it went to something like, 14 degrees Fahrenheit above zero, down to 40 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. Good luck. 12 hours is nighttime, by the way, and all the stores are closed, but good luck getting ready. Now, what do you think they're going to do with the Grand Solar Minimum? What's going to affect the economy when people are going to pull their money out of the banks? The Grand Solar Minimum, intensification, and really putting it into the mainstream media to talk about it, it's never going to happen now, in my opinion. Seeing what just happened with this event that historically I can't believe what happened. They didn't warn everybody. And you think they're going to warn you about the Grand Solar Minimum intensification? I think they're going to just let nature do its thing and hope for the best and then try to control those that are left on the backside. My analysis, finally, that I've come to conclude, before I had some hope in humanity, I had some hope, truly I did, that there might be some saner minds that would come together and perhaps a conversation might start about us finding solutions for this. But in the end, I start to realize now, finally, maybe I was deluding myself, but we're all on our own. Nobody's coming to help you. Nobody's going to warn you. Nobody's going to give you information except voices like myself and others. And I think in the future, those are going to be relegated to the side as well. They're not going to warn you. They're not going to tell you. This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.